I just need a blue shirt and an artist palette. And I'll be Bob Rouse.
All right, welcome to
the entirety of the Blue Man.
Another episode.
They were terrifying.
Shameless promotion.
That was one of the most entertaining and terrifying shows I've ever seen, and I saw it like earlier this year.
It doesn't matter if you wake up, you can't breathe.
Okay, I'm
sitting
here.
on top of you are all three of the Blue Men.
Okay, I'm here.
Just looking down at you.
My name is Anthony Wilkinson.
Welcome
I'm
to
Anthony Wilkinson.
No, you're not.
I'm
This is
Anthony-
identity theft.
And
Hey.
Linnea Andersson needs to shut the fuck up.
Hey,
I'm so
Hey.
Josh Robbins.
hey, let me do the intro.
Ugh.
Welcome to the Construction Podcast. I am Anthony Wilkinson.
I'm Josh Robbins.
And I'm Anthony Wilkinson.
All right, well, I guess there's going to be two of me today.
No.
Double the trouble. I'm having a lot of trouble remembering what we did last week, because last week I was pretty much dead on the inside and outside. I think we figured out that it was called Omega, and
You come up with the rest.
Omega. It's a choose your own adventure title, which not a lot of people have been exploring this idea of letting people just decide what the movie is going to be called. You get a movie ticket and a Sharpie, and it just says Omega, and then there's colons, and then you get to fill out the rest
Are
of the title.
colons the things that are dashes but lower?
So we think it's a movie.
Underscore. It should be underscore, so you know that you're supposed to fill it in.
No, a colon's the two dots.
Right, but okay, I love colons. Aren't they
So
semicolons?
it's like you basically get to make the tagline for the movie. Now there were some drawbacks because a lot of people just put Omega and then just Ligma, and I fell for it every time I asked what Ligma meant. So we
What does ligma mean?
It took me too long.
Ligma S.
I did. Okay. Okay.
Can we just start over?
Yeah,
Just,
like from the beginning, from the
Star
top.
White.
You'd be surprised.
Star White.
That was a pretty good.
I said Star White, but it was the tale of our Greek mythology space adventure, where they're trying to revive the old gods. What form of media did this take? Besides
Series?
Choose Your Own Adventure
I think
book.
it was a series.
Yeah, I think we talked about TV series, was where we kind of landed. I don't know. This is another one I think would have maybe made a good anime or like animated thing.
It could be a graphic novel. It could be a graphic novel series.
Okay. Yeah.
It could be a series of paintings in an interactive art gallery. Could be.
It could be an amusement park.
It could be. It could be 3 roller coasters that crash into each other.
It could be Shia LaBeouf. Fuck it.
The man.
Just Shia LaBeouf.
Just doing everything, every role.
Oh, he's playing all the roles. I mean,
every role, and it's alive. It's live.
I
And
mean,
that's
what
his newest installation.
what else is he doing right now?
Nothing. So
He's not with
not
Optimus
busy.
anymore. He's looking for a new franchise ever since Bumblebee gave him the old boot. So I'm just saying Shia LaBeouf, who is watching this right now,
Definitely listens.
Definitely
just hit us up
listens.
if you want to play every role in our futuristic sci-fi Greek mythology tale.
Tail.
Definite casting. I mean, that's money in the bank for you right there.
Correct.
Filming's going to be a nightmare, but
You know.
anyway,
always is,
let's hop back on this horse and roll what are going to be our 2 influences. So that's 2 numbers between 1 and 60. And the first one is 16, which is apocalyptic,
Okay.
which I've misspelled on the list.
Yeah, I
It's
was
alright.
like.
We know we get the gist.
And our next number is going to be
Okay, yeah.
our next number is going to be
Utopia. That'd be hilarious.
Apocalyptic
Apocalyptic Utopia.
Utopia.
I wish.
No.
and I rolled 53 for the second one, which is going to be
Oh.
ethereal.
Ethereal.
Yeah.
Pull up.
Ethereal
Say that.
apocalyptic.
Say it how you said that, Tony.
Ethereal. Ethereal.
Ethereal. You know, it's one of those words that you only ever read, and then you say it out loud and you sound stupid.
I am actually pretty sure it's pronounced ethereal.
You're probably right.
Ethanol.
Ethanol?
Like tits now. Anyway.
But it's ethereal?
Apocalyptic ethereal.
Ethereal.
Yeah, ethereal.
Yeah.
Ethereal.
Did I say ethereal?
Yeah.
What the fuck? I don't even know why I said it that way.
You just read it. It was phonetic.
I'm just tired.
So that's gonna be interesting.
So what was it? What was it? Ethereal.
Apocalyptic and ethereal.
Ethereal is sort of like this whimsical feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember what the first word was. Okay, so now we gotta roll three.
We're gonna get into how we define ethereal. I feel like
we'll Google ethereal after this.
We gotta roll 3 major events now. That's 3 numbers between 1 and 137. First one is and it's 9, which is an evil superpower.
Oh, fantastic!
Fits into apocalyptic for sure.
42, which is cloning.
Ooh. Haven't we?
We haven't done cloning.
We definitely
actually have a good idea for cloning.
And 58, which is doomsday device.
Okay, so
this could be even
real
almost
quick,
pre-apocalyptic.
I want to take
into apocalyptic.
I want to take over cloning really fast here. Actually, I lied. Let's Google ethereal.
Well, before we do that, we still got to roll what's going to be in our world.
I forgot about that.
Right.
I was ready to go.
Ethereal dwarves.
And that's
I'm
one
really
number
hoping.
between. Well, here's the thing. We usually roll for one thing. Do you want to spice it up and roll for 2 things in this world?
Yeah. Let's just do it.
So then, why don't we not have humans and instead have these 2 things?
Okay. Well, the first one's gnomes. Cat.
I don't want gnomes. Give me a reroll.
Omega.
I don't want gnomes at all.
My cat's
Actually, I do
Omega.
want gnomes. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can't argue with the list.
You're
The only time we bend the rules is if we roll something we've already rolled.
Correct.
So
the most interesting thing in our podcast.
Gnomes.
Yeah. So we got gnomes, and then we got. Oh, that's boring. We've already done that one. Cyborgs.
Yeah, we've already done that one.
We've done and.
Yeah, we've done cyborgs.
No, we did do cyborgs.
We've certainly done. It was like kaiju.
Something.
No.
I know. No, we've done.
No,
cyborgs.
we haven't done cyborgs.
We have done. Yes, and here's why.
We did augmented. We did augmentation as one of our major events.
But it was when we had the little fire guy. You know.
Those were elementals.
Oh, fuck.
Do you think cyborgs and elementals are the same thing?
No, I just can't remember. It was like weeks ago. Reasonably.
I'm just confused. But
I mean, no.
So we got gnomes and cyborgs.
Gnomes and cyborgs. We also have cyborg gnomes.
Yes, of course they're going to be cyborg.
Cyberatic gnomes.
I love this.
But yes, we got our what was it?
Apocalyptic, ethereal.
Yeah, our
influences.
Yeah. So let's. Now I'm scared to say that word.
Ethereal.
So. Extremely delicate in light. That's not what we need. Let's look at some images of. So it's like kind of like just like
whimsical.
Yeah, like kind of floaty and bright and.
Like an ethereal presence. Oh, perfect example is from Lord of the Rings. In the second one, the Dark Forest Queen. Elf.
Gotcha.
That's ethereal.
So it can be kind of light,
so
light and floaty, but it also can be sort of light, floaty, and scary.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah, like this guy.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Like
there's definitely a light darkness aspect to it.
Yeah, so we got that, but we have there's an evil superpower, and I think by evil superpower, what I meant when I put it on the list was like an evil like world order, kind of like like the Nazis. Like that's what I meant by an evil superpower.
Got it.
We don't necessarily have to go that direction. I guess since we could bend what it is, but that was the initial intent of the words on the list. And
so here's my first theme that I want. Everybody has 4 clones of themselves, and something happens when they come together. But they're all separated across a certain amount of space, such as the world or whatever world that we're living in.
Okay.
Let's say that our cosmos is breathable. Hear me out. Space, breathable. It makes it ethereal.
Where can we?
It's just in space, like in like an asteroid field.
No, like the kind of space that we're looking at here. So Tony, can you go back to this imagery?
That will show here.
That will show here or right.
I like these little cubes. Hey.
So just sort of this.
When you do your podcast.
sort of this really peaceful sort of world almost.
Yeah, I want
Not
that.
not necessarily in a strictly like space or like galaxy sense.
But what I would love is that we have a far more poignant background that is in our heads and here spacey.
Well, if we were like
Stars are brighter.
like a Garden of Eden type place where it's kind of like, like there's no definite location. It could be kind of anywhere, and there seems to be like no limit or no like there's no limit to like where the world ends, but also like no desire to go anywhere else.
Yes.
Now hear me out.
Yes.
Let's talk about orbs.
Yeah, okay.
How many of these how we got orbs?
5 orbs.
5
One for each of your
orbs.
clone. It's related.
Well, I'm saying in general, like orbs like floating around and shit. They got a bunch of floaty shit. I'm just saying,
yeah.
I picture a lot of orbs.
Me too.
I'm not budging on the orbs, goddammit.
So oh man. Do the gnomes or the cyborgs control the orbs? Because I feel like
and
that's
the cyborgs are the same thing.
Okay, I
Okay.
feel like I made a bigger deal out of the orbs.
Josh.
I feel like I've really built up these orbs.
So we have these nomidic cyborgs,
Yeah.
not nomadic cyborgs, but
Nomadic,
gnome-
nomidic cyborgs.
Or hear me out.
Ooh.
Orbs. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking about orbs now.
We got our nomadic,
But they're there.
nomidic
just know that even if
cyborgs.
we don't ever actually integrate
about
them
them
in,
ever
they're
again.
there.
But I swear to God, do not forget about the goddamn orbs. I fucking
You just wait; they'll be there
um.
by the end of this episode.
But yeah. Anyway, so these clones. Why 4 clones?
Because I like the number 5.
Oh, so there's 4 in addition to the person.
So it's like yourself and 4 more. So 5, and they all feel like they are themselves. So 5 clones of every inhabitant in this world, in theory.
And so
I want to hear Josh's thought.
No, Tony, go. You already moving?
is it ethereal or is it ethereal?
Ethereal.
Ethereal.
Because okay.
5
Now I'm scared. I can't say it.
5
Ethereal.
clones to activate
It's
the
a-
Doomsday device.
Yeah.
Well, in the
Or the anti-doomsday device that is controlled by the thing. That's
We
bad.
have apocalyptic as one of our influences.
I
I feel like our doomsday. I feel like if we're doing an ethereal type of world, our doomsday device has to actually destroy it.
fine.
And so I feel like the goal is almost to destroy the ethereal world.
or
So
to
everybody's evil.
well, doomsday
this-
doesn't necessarily mean destruction. It could just signify a great shift. In,
Oh, I got what
like
I got.
like
something.
a cultural death.
Okay.
So like almost to get rid of the evil superpower.
That's what I just
Or that
said.
the evil superpower could significantly like it could be. I'm saying that maybe this doomsday device isn't something that is physically destructive, but emotionally or spiritually destructive.
And you need that to kill the other 4 clones, because if you kill your other 4, you get to live forever. Throwing that in.
I mean, it's possible. Yeah, that's fair.
Mhm.
I do have an idea I want to pitch
Pitch.
about that involves your 4 clones in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, I'm saying, what if so? Ethereal stuff like the ethereal plane is a big thing in like
That's not
Dungeons
how you
and
say it.
Dragons. I don't believe you. It's like in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like the spirit plane.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's non-physical entities. So if we're imagining this world, these our characters and our inhabitants and these gnomes, they can be less tangible and more kind of ideologies or personifications of ideas and emotions, kind of like an everyman or like an Inside Out. Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
With the emotions?
Yeah.
Something more like that. So that this world we're seeing, it's like
What Air Bears.
what if it's like an Inside Out, like Osmosis Jones kind of deal, where we're actually seeing, but like a real gritty version of it,
Yeah.
like where it's like we're talking about like, and the Doomsday device is like it triggers ego death or something like that.
Okay.
So that's my pitch, is that these clones is like you're basically your consciousness gets split into different parts that inhabit these different
Okay.
societies that represent different aspects of yourself. So one is like one is like
Tony's
your
lost all of his words.
emotions. I'm just trying to figure out what these would be. Like
Yeah,
I'm thinking like one is dealing with your, or maybe it's like dealing with your issues. One is like you living in this almost simulation that helps you regulate your relationships, and another one that helps you with your work, and another one, I don't know, that's kind of
I kind of get what you're saying, though. It's sort of like So your ego is split up in your 5 clones, and each of these clones are dealing with one of your greatest issues, let's say. So this society represents disorganization.
See, that's better. Yes.
Yeah. And this society represents social anxiety or whatever. This one represents, dealing with social things.
So we take all the people with different ailments and put them in the same area.
Well, yeah, but you are split across your 5 issues.
Yeah, that's interesting. This would be another opportunity to kind of go in and out. Something we do a lot in our stories is going in and out of our worlds.
Yes.
And this is between like watching this man deal with his life and him interacting with these. Man, okay, that's fine.
Oh, because we've done too many males.
I was meant it more in the concept of like every man.
Every man. So every man must go through every.
So,
yes.
Oh, I was just so like our like person like you're this fish we're going like kind of almost like the inside out route. Like our person could be in this apocalyptic world, but then like in the other on the other side of the story, the ethereal plane, we have our other inhabitants, and like
are those like get over your 5 shitties, you can go over to the ethereal place.
No,
well, I think you just
I don't think that's what he was
what
saying.
Are you trying to say?
Sorry, you continue.
I mean, no, I was just like trying to establish where we're at and like how the world's gonna function. So like. I guess like in the ethereal plane we'd have our cyborg gnomes, and then like we have our everyman figure trying to survive in an apocalyptic world, and like dealing with it's more of a mental or like spiritual journey than anything else.
Yes, so that theory of time is happening all at once, right? And there's multiple dimensions.
Yeah.
So it's like. The ethereal plane exists on top of our apocalyptic plane, and you can, when the time is right, like during, let's say the correct time of storms, right? When the energy is correct, there are holes that exist in between these 2 worlds, and you can travel between the 2. And these cyborg gnomes,
it's pronounced cyborg.
Cyborg gnomes, fuck you.
Can we just call them cyber gnomes?
The
gnome borgs.
And you can go and they are very wise, and they can travel in between these worlds, right? And they can help these humans, right, split across 5 societies of clones that were made by the evil force, our evil superpower. So it took all of the humans, right? And split them, clone them, and put them into suffer zones, different forms of suffering.
See, what I was getting at was a little bit different. I was saying that there isn't. It's what we're seeing is almost like a visualization of their interior. It's less, and so I was going to say with these clones, and I'm not saying that your way is wrong.
There is no right or wrong. We're fucking making worlds up.
Yeah. What I was getting at is more like he's dealing with these things, and there's something that's going on. I imagine it more like living in this apocalyptic world is slowly draining the people's will to live. Like there are people who are just eventually they're just staring out, and that's like the ego death or whatever. It's like they just give up trying to live anymore. Like they have to be fed. And this is a man going through this apocalypse and dealing with all these things and meeting all these people, and he is slowly. And that's what's the fear is in this interior world of his imaginary escape where he retreats from his surroundings.
Is the ethereal world?
Yeah,
that's neat.
And it's and what happens to him in the real world. It's like there's this fantasy world with all these gnomes and this technological stuff that he was like, maybe it was something he, as a kid, he loved that. Like he did that. Or
gnome borgs. He loved gnome borgs.
Yeah.
They love gnome borgs.
She loves gnome borgs.
Gnome borgs.
But something happens, like she gets mugged or attacked or something like that.
Right.
And she's lying there bleeding. And we get to see interior in her mind. There's some great big battle, and there's all this other stuff. Almost yes. I think that's what I'm saying now. Is she's putting her world onto the apocalypse.
Her ethereal world is a coping mechanism.
Yes,
and it's her delusion, but it's her coping mechanism to deal with the shitty life that she actually lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the doomsday device
This
is
is a PSA for schizophrenia.
it's inside our character's mind.
like it's not a real thing.
Yeah, I like that.
Like basically, because I imagine an apocalypse, one of the things is like you no longer have a job or a purpose, and like so many people have died, and like all this other stuff. Like
People are just kind of milling
What do
about
you-
like zombies.
yeah, what do you do with your day?
And like any kind of control is just absolutely corrupt and cruel, and only is trying just to find whatever scarce resources are left.
Can we
And so
say
this
that
is a
the-
story about her trying to find this doomsday device that doesn't really exist, but she's convinced that
I
she
like
can
that.
save the world and defeat this evil overarching superpower, which was destroyed long ago when the world was destroyed. But she still thinks it's functioning.
Okay.
Yes.
And the clones are happening. So let's just say that this evil superpower came in, made clones of everybody, right? They were slaves for a while, then it was a giant boom, right? And now they're just all milling about, lost.
So maybe what if she's
Ooh.
literally living in a world of clones?
Yeah.
And like,
Cloning
Yes.
caused the apocalypse because after we figured out how to clone people, we eventually just ran out of resources, led to resource wars, which leads to probably either nuclear or just total and all out war.
But the superpower made the clones for slave labor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the idea of like we need more people to build more things in order to survive, but it just totally backfired.
I also like the idea. So they make these clones, right?
Mhm.
And the clones they're made for slave labor, and they're meant to like not really do anything beyond that.
Right.
But then some genetic disease gets released, but these clones, having this very specific DNA, were
Mhm.
immune to it.
Okay, so all the originals are dead, and what's
So it is just mainly,
Ooh.
it's pretty much just, and maybe like there's some other characters who were survivors or
Yeah.
whatever, or like still very sick or something like that. The clones now, who are bred to like do nothing but work and toil,
Mm-hmm.
now don't know what to do and like are trying to build this society.
Mm-hmm.
in a wasteland.
Yeah.
Or, I
'cause-
mean, aren't they just kind of yeah, I guess they're kind of trying to do that, but they lack the will.
And the reason, and this clone in particular, like finds some old storybook or something. Like I
Mhm.
imagine almost like a children's book about
Right.
gnomes, like running through.
Like
and-
gnomes. Like
and when
these
it-
gnomes.
And at the same time is like also reading like a fucking like sci-fi novel book or
Right.
something. Like it's just like pulling these random books, and these are the books that she's found. And it uses this.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not just that. Maybe it increases with other books she reads. She's like personifying the
Because, like,
actions around her.
What makes that neat is because, like, when she was originally cloned, right, like, she'd never, like, books are part of the old world, pre-clone, and so
Yeah.
there is no media or consumption.
Well, there's
or
no need to
anything.
teach them. They were
Yeah.
like they were meant to like work in
Right.
fields and
Mhm.
like turn
And so she finds this
gears. I don't know.
she finds this picture book full of these pictures
Yeah.
of cyborg gnomes in an ethereal landscape, and that becomes her escape.
Or like, and then she like
A
slowly
delusion.
like picks up pieces of these ruined comics or whatever pictures she can find, and like
Mhm.
pieces together what maybe either like the old world was like or
Yeah,
what the
yeah,
new
yeah.
world could be.
Yes.
Yeah.
At least in her
I like
head.
all
Or in
the
their head.
while, like she's dealing with these very different. She's using the fantasy and the sci-fi fiction
Mhm.
to mask the horrors of this
Of the
Mad
reality.
Max-esque
Mm-hmm.
dystopia. Like
Mhm.
she's able to spin
I
it
picture it dark.
to make herself she's making herself a hero in a world where she is nothing.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
she's making up this story
hmm
to give her purpose when she has none.
And so,
She has a little scrapbook of all these,
which
all
is
the
a
comics
reflection
and
of
shit.
reality, because we are the determiners of our own
Yeah.
future.
I also do like the idea that she can't read, so it's all pictures. Actually,
Yeah, yeah.
is what she's.
Because I mean, she would,
forming this from.
yeah, 'cause she would never have had the opportunity or reason to have been taught.
I do love.
To read.
I do imagine a moment near the end. I know I'm always pitching weird, random moments in the movies, but I imagine there's a moment at the end where like she's been dealing with these pictures all this time, but like maybe she finds this working TV or something, and like there's an old VHS of like an old silent movie or something like that, or like not even that, but anything, and we get to see her for the first time seeing these moving images and being able to like like obviously like she can speak English, but she can't read. So she's never been able to really experience meaning, but she's like watching for the first time something, and maybe she's seeing like a classic or something like this, but like is experiencing this media, and that's because I mean eventually our character has to learn that she's not the hero. There's no doomsday device that,
Mhm.
and I imagine that it's almost like she discovers this afterwards, and it's kind of a story of a need for the human.
Purpose.
Well,
A
not
need
only that,
for
but for like
purpose.
art and expression, and how that's part of the experience of being alive, being
Yeah.
human. That's what separates us from animals, you know.
theoretically.
Yeah, and even monkeys and elephants paint, people making fun of them.
So a clone searching for soul, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, what is
that's
it? What
correct.
does it mean to be a human? Because, like, once again, like, their DNA isn't. That's why they were able to survive. Why they didn't go sick? Because they're not technically human.
Right. Not all the way.
But
A little bit.
yeah, but that's the thing. Like, that's her thing. She's trying to find out. Like, am I human or am I this gnome? Am I this space pilot? Am I this? Am I this? Like, she keeps finding all these characters she identifies with that aren't humans, and then that reality always crashes when she realizes she's not that thing.
Yes.
Like, she's not a gnome, she's not a cyborg, she's not this. And so it's basically, it's honestly, like you said, very dark and probably heartbreaking as you're seeing this woman desperately trying to find who she is
And what she is.
and being unable to make that connection because there's no support system left.
Right. Everybody's just a...
I think Josh wanted to say something too.
Oh no, we've moved past it. We found a better solution.
Cruise way.
I say I'm a processing and distilling.
But this story took a weird turn. But like there is something interesting about that, and I think that is a more interesting discussion that has been definitely touched before in other mediums. I mean, like that's what Blade Runner is all about. Is like these super advanced androids, and at a certain point, do they become equal to humans? Do they have a soul?
I mean, something that I find lacking, and just to make a quick side note, in media, right, are more introspective tales that aren't really about things that happen externally, right? Like event. Oh my God, it was him the whole time. Whatever, What you see less often are things that delve into, self-identity and like what is literally self.
So it seems like
introspection.
It's Blade Runner meets Inside Out meets Mad Max.
Well, also,
I love
this is actually very similar to is a movie that not a lot of people talk about, and I've heard people on both sides of the fence. I personally liked it when I saw it, but I was pretty young. If I watched it again, it might not hold up as well. But Sucker Punch, did you guys ever see that movie? It's this tale about these girls who are in a mental asylum, and they picture themselves as these badass
I did see part of it.
Heroes with machine guns that are going on these missions and trying to do this thing, but they are dying off, but they're not really dying. They're getting lobotomies is what's really happening. But in the movie, they perceive that as their characters dying, because they can no longer interact. And and I think this is similar to that.
Like introspective, coping mechanism, delusions, and what it means to be a human and art.
Yeah, and the realities she constructs are obviously like metaphors for what she's going through at the time. It's her
reimagination of reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
to make it slightly better because reality fucking sucks.
Yeah, and I think the cloning, it adds that level of like, not only does she not feel like she's a human, but like what makes me
a good
different
moment.
Yeah,
because I think
she does eventually run into one of her own selves.
I think there's a lot of.
I think she's constantly around the clones. I think she eventually runs into someone who's not a clone.
Oh.
I think they're all super aware of what's happened. They're like, okay, there's no one else that doesn't look like me.
Yeah, I think that's honestly what breaks her out of this clone society is her meeting someone who's not a clone, and she saves them or something.
Everybody is her?
Yes.
Everybody.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like she's living like she's and it's like this basic very apocalyptic, almost agricultural, kind of like Hunger Games-esque, they're living in shacks.
I've always I've been picturing it as Fallout this whole time.
Okay, yeah. And that works too, because I mean there probably technology wouldn't all fade away, but it's very much
I just picture it as Katniss's original home quadrant. That's what I see.
And so it's something like that, and I think that she eventually finds someone who's not a clone, maybe it's a guy or something, because they're all women. This guy shows up, and I think the clones are honestly kind of confused as to what to do, because they thought all the other humans died out,
right?
But they have in their history, this is they're the slavers, the people who forced them to toil and destroyed the world, and so they want to punish him, but for some reason she saves him.
So one,
I think she comes very close to just ending him, just offing him.
But then humanity. She, for whatever reason, has a spark of humanity. She's the same one that's having these delusions. So
I love that. Well, he's part of the delusion. He's and I mean, I don't want to be dumb about this, but I think what fits into like the whole delusional fantasy, like he's like the prince on the horse riding in,
yeah.
Or
he's like some elf prince.
And I'm not even saying they
prince.
have to actually
Not.
fall in
He's
love.
not.
I actually like the idea more if it kind of starts out that way, but then they figure out that that's not their deal. Like it isn't like that. Like they do have a need for connection, but it's not. I don't know. I think it's kind of dumb. That's
Turns
like
out
what
it's her
saves her
brother.
life
Like,
is
fuck it.
what saves her life
cousin.
is this. But I do think that like the idea of the prince is less like, oh, I want to fuck that man, is like as much as it's like, what is this different person,
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
He's sort of
And are
different.
there more of him and he just came from a very far off
Or
place?
I think there are very
versus the
few.
role.
I think
She
there-
pictures herself as the knight, and he's the damsel in distress. He's the
Ooh,
princess in the carriage, or whatever.
So she's like this badass warrior, right? And then she finds like this innocent elf man,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we forgot
Well-
about the elves for sure. Yes.
Well, because I imagine this is like this guy actually is like kind of sickly and weak because like he survived this sickness,
but just barely.
yeah, and like that's the thing is like they're starting to find out that some of these people did actually survive. They're coming out of their bunkers or whatever,
Yeah.
and they've made it. And so, but that's her first adventure, is her like saving the princess from the tower. But the princess is this guy
Right.
who rode into town.
I love that like the men in the society are seen as like the former slavers and like are hated. I love this world we're building here.
Well, not just the men, just non-clones in general.
Fair enough.
I'm just saying this specifically. I think
So
that
it
would be
makes
like,
sense that they've started to emerge after a certain amount of time.
yeah. Because like I do think like there's a
Bunker
twist later
stuff.
on, like maybe like they're in one clone society area and they find out one of the clones is just someone who's like is a woman who's just disguised herself to look more like the clone. Like she's not
Yeah.
actually a clone, but she just looked very similar, so she could pass for one.
Yeah.
Because I think there are factions of clones that hate.
Mhm.
I don't know what we'd call normal people, I guess, but
Because the normal people are the former evil superpower.
Yeah.
And a big boom, and then they're starting to come out maybe like 100 years later.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And so
Because these clones don't really die.
I think what she perceives is that what the doomsday weapon is there's the disease that wiped out most of humanity but left the clones unharmed.
Mm-hmm.
She thinks that there's these people who are tweaking the disease so it will destroy the
Ooh.
clones instead now.
Ooh. And that's
And that way
that's perfectly delusional.
Yeah. And so it's like she has to stop that, and then
Paranoia.
eventually she finds out like no. Like maybe that's also why she wants to almost use this human that she rescues to lead her
Find
to
the doomsday
the other
device.
humans. And that's when she finally does make her way back there.
Yep.
And like, oh man, I'm picturing so many sequences now of her like picturing herself as like Robin Hood and all these other
Mhm.
things like going through. And when she finds the human and she sees that they're just trying to live, like they're
Right,
just
like
trying
they're
to
all
survive.
sick.
just like the
You know.
clones.
Just like the clones.
Trying
Right,
to
and-
figure out what their purpose is again.
And they show her, and that's they're actually what they are. They're the ones who show her the movie or whatever. Like there's like they have like a night we're all watching, and that's her getting to see this in this art about like who am I? What is this like?
So-
What is,
Or kind of like almost like
Big,
what is the Burns of post-electric play?
oh yeah, Mr. Burns.
Kind of like in that sense where like it's like that's an episode of The Simpsons, but like I don't know what, like some pop culture thing.
So big picture real fast, big picture to structure here. So it's like the humans have been living underground for let's say 200 years. Bear with me. And they had this underground society and they did like continue to breed and whatever, but it's been long enough that they forgot that, they didn't forget, but it's far enough away that they were once this evil superpower, right? Some of them start to go up to the main ground. Now all this time, these clones, they don't die, okay? Because they're genetically modified to be away, right? And so a human, they start to kind of come up, this dude comes up, right? And she's been living, like, weaving in between, like, this shitty wasteland and this ethereal place full of cyborg gnomes, right? And then he comes up and she's, like, been looking for,
It's almost like her companion. I think she has a cyborg gnome.
yeah.
That she's like obviously just in her head, but
What's the gnome Borg's name?
Joffrey.
We can't name it after something everybody hates.
What's Joffrey that everyone hates?
Game of Thrones.
No,
Have you seen Game of
I've
Thrones?
not seen Game of Thrones.
Whoa! Okay.
I mean,
But and so that we're weaving in that blah 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 blah, and then this dude shows up, right? And then she's like, "This human is gonna lead me to the other humans that are like trying to kill me, even though nothing's actually trying to kill her. It's just her soul dying inside, right? Because she doesn't have any purpose." And so they go on this adventure, right? And visually speaking, this adventure is going to weave between, he's a feature in her delusion world as well, right?
Yeah.
And so they're weaving in between wasteland and like ethereal gnome place, and then eventually he takes her underground to like where like the shitty underground like society that humans have built since they went under there due to the bomb that they caused 200 years ago.
Yeah, and
the disease.
And I imagine like once again like she's seeing these. She has these scraps of like comic books and picture books and stuff that she's creating these characters and stuff from that she is like helps her solve these situations. Like this thing where she sees herself as Robin Hood. She sees herself as like a cowboy. She sees herself.
They have the whole books.
Well, no, and not. Here's what I was
She
imagining.
only has pictures. She doesn't get to read the words in any of the books. She just
Right.
And I'm imagining now it's less like she's watching one movie with everyone. When he brings her to the side, he's like, I think you'll like this. And he has an old TV with like a VCR that's still running, and he's showing her the actual versions of the stories we've seen her experiencing. Like, because like she all she knows of Robin Hood, she sees pictures of Robin Hood.
Right.
But now she gets to see the story of Robin Hood and like hear it and see the character.
It kind of messes with her head because it doesn't fit with necessarily the story she told in her own head.
But at the same time,
she has a bit of a breakdown.
Yeah, like and there's that like no, this isn't what I thought it was. This isn't this, and that leads again like there's that struggle of
I had it all wrong.
Yeah, and was I wrong for this? Was I right? And I think that like this emotional journey.
Her already messed up reality, right? It gets more fucked up.
And like that would basically gets her to this point where she's finally like, okay, I can't do this any longer. I have to go and find the disease and destroy it. And so like she kind of turns on the guy a little, and he goes and tries to find it but can't. And like this is all leading up to the climax where she finds out that nothing that she thought was real was real. The gnome on her shoulder was like telling her was lying to her, and like it was what she wanted to hear.
Everything was
like
her imagination.
Yeah, and that
Gnomeborg.
But at the same time, now she has this support system, this guy, this community that talk to her, and they help her establish it. Like even though you are this, this is what it means to be human.
Right. So
and
basically,
if this is how you
interact
feel
with people, because the clones never, the gnomes and the clones. That's the name of the episode.
Gnomes and clones.
Gnomes and clones. They never really interacted with each other, so that's why she made that.
Yeah,
fake,
I imagine the clones almost act to each other like. Have you ever seen the movie Equilibrium?
Maybe.
Basically, it was Christian Bale is the main guy in it, but it's this. I hope I'm not getting this mixed up, but it's this guy who basically he's the head of this police force in the future where emotions are illegal.
Ooh, fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so if you feel something there's a very iconic scene from it where he's digging up these floorboards because there's something stashed under there, and there's a bunch of old paintings like the Mona Lisa sitting right there, and he burns it because art isn't allowed because art makes you feel.
Right.
And so, and I don't think that the clones, it's illegal for clones, but maybe the clones, they kind of have this that's how they were made.
They were
their emotions are
to each
muted.
other.
And there's an inhibitor in them somehow. And but she's managed to, she's finding she's breaking through it.
I don't think it's in any kind of necessarily technical inhibitor or genetic inhibitor. I think it's just a learned behavior.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just how they function.
Well, and also they don't have a culture. And I mean that was, I think it's a huge thing with with actual the actual slave trade and all these people complain about how no joke these people who were in this situation lost their culture.
Right.
They don't know what their past was, where they came from, what they were meant to do. And this is a more extreme version of that in our story where someone specifically created and literally had no culture ever.
Right.
Because there was no way for them to have a culture.
Right. Because they were just created and then work.
And so now it's this thing, it's this society that has no culture that's building itself off the bones of another culture and piecing it together. And this girl more than most is literally piecing together our
history,
our media and our culture and trying to figure out what it means and what it was for and all this other stuff and
so
imagine her
speaking. What makes it really interesting is that we have had we as a species, right, we began in caves drawing cave paintings, right, and it's if we have we built off of that and we've built our artistic culture as we've evolved, whatever, progressed, and it's a conceptually interesting point because it's here we are humans, right, that were cloned, that have no knowledge of anything that was art ever before, but are capable of it, but don't know. You know what I mean? And that's, what her imagination is. That's where art comes from, is your imagination, introspection. It's all of those things. And so, we get to witness in this story, right, somebody piecing together, or creativity raw, from like no standpoint.
Developing their aesthetic.
Building their identity.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, because I think, we take for granted as...
A lot of our identity comes from art that we've consumed.
Yeah, like we get it. We get to do it gradually. But this is someone who's having to piece it together as a fully formed entity.
Yeah.
And who they are and what and all that other stuff and all these... And then these added, very hyperbolized, extreme versions of the questions that we face ourselves. Mm-hmm. All in, with all these other extreme factors. I really think that there's some interesting
concepts and meanings.
There's a lot. There's a lot of depth here.
There's a lot of depth
for what could have been a very ridiculous concept. There's a lot of.
No, I mean it's not quite at the same levels of Kaiju School Musical.
Right. No, I don't think we could ever hope to top or even like come close to that.
Nothing could be the deepest.
To the emotional payoff and delving into the depths of not only our souls but the souls of Kaiju.
I'm still crying over that.
I thought that the Kaiju was cyborg, but I don't know. It doesn't.
Well, no, they had
Now it's the
Gnomes.
Now it's the
gnome
boards.
With the Kaiju, they were the robot Kaiju as well.
No, what?
They were the robot Kaiju as well, like Mechagodzilla
that's what
and stuff like that.
About. Okay.
So we added that in on our own, not under the influence of the
we
role.
had to. Okay.
We haven't got an augmentation before, but this is the first time we specifically got cyborgs as inhabitants. There are some redundancies in the list, honestly. Like
that's okay. That's okay.
It's still a very different world than Kaiju School Musical. That's what's for sure.
I think everything's different from Kaiju School Musical.
I don't think there's anything close to it.
I don't think so either.
But yeah, no, and I mean, I like this concept. I like the going back and forth between her imagination and the real world and seeing. And I think the cut back and forth allows for this very interesting way of telling the story where you don't really get the stakes until you have the drop away. Because like you have it built in like this thing's going it's almost like over
so it's
the
like,
top.
let's say
and, like,
she's like fighting somebody, right? And it's like kind of like this World of Warcraft kind of feel, like in her ethereal world, and they fight and it's all very magical and it's like, ooh, and then it drops away and there's just blood and like horror.
Yeah.
The true horror.
Yeah.
And like definitely along those lines, like, and how she uses these shields
to do the things that she has to do that she knows is wrong or whatever to survive.
Or that like is horrific.
Yeah.
And I mean, and even just to cope with bad things that may happen to her while this is going on.
Yeah. So yeah.
Because I can't imagine the wildlife is pleasant. Anything that survived is gotta be probably.
So she's like fighting this, like fucked up animal, and then really she's like fighting a more like regal animal in her fake world, and then it drops away, and she's just like amongst like this carcass of like
And I imagine it's like like the scene where she's picturing herself with this great banquet or whatever, and she's really just huddled over this campfire, eating this
can of
beans.
So sad.
Like
I don't know.
But beyond that, I think it has potential for some comedy too, and like to break it up with the fantasy can also be funny and
but then it drops, and that would do a lot for an audience, right? It's like, that banquet like scene, she's eating and she's like laughing with like her gnome or whatever, and they're having this pleasant thing, and then it just drops away and she's just alone, cold and huddled, and it's like just so sad.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to take a stance right now on this podcast. Watch Sucker Punch. It's not the best, but it was really interesting what it did.
It was novel.
It was an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It was a little bit weirdly over-sexualized, maybe.
I recall that vaguely.
That might be my one complaint. But in general, I think it did a really cool thing.
It was kind of like 5 Harlequins, wasn't it?
No joke. It very much had Harlequin energy.
Yeah.
Like that's what
I remember.
That's what it was. But it was very weird, and because it was very tough to watch. It went back and forth between like these very hardcore like action scenes and like these. Then it would go back into the asylum, and it would just be kind of gut wrenching. I remember it would just kind of be like, ugh. And the lobotomies, like those scenes were rough because like they kind of happened suddenly. Like they would just be accompanied by this big, like, clinking noise essentially, and like every time I heard it, it just like sends chills down my spine. I very much recommend watching this because it's very similar to what we're describing.
Okay. So just to throw in another cyborg element, and maybe why like the gnomes are cyborgs. What if like in kind of an effort to sort of combat the clones, and like in like the 11th hour, the humans created some sort of like cyborg machine to start killing off some of the clones, and there's still like a couple of those just around the wasteland. Like very, very, very few of them because it was like at the last
I see what you're saying.
second.
So they were just a stand is just like these monolithic or massive. I think I'm using the right word. Just big, kind of like gosh, what is the reference I'm trying to think of? But they're basically just almost like giant statues at this point in her world, right? And they're static.
All I will say, and if you guys outvote me, I will not argue against this point too much.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like it being more realistic and not having cyborgs. I like the cyborgs being part of her imagination because I think it makes it, the realer this is, I think the harder it hits.
Yeah,
and I think if the cyborgs is her, and I think that the cyborg thing is almost more of a metaphor. It's like the cyborg's made of pieces of different things. It's
that
building
makes sense
because
she just kind of saw pictures in a book and she just tossed it on the gnomes in her head.
Yeah, and the gnome is like built,
the
gnome is like built and put together like almost like a toy more than anything else,
like
but
Santa's workshop.
Yeah, so I think it's the idea of the cyborg is more about, it's a little bit more metaphorical, and I think it's one that she goes to a lot because I think her favorite things are these two specific stories. One is like a sci-fi thing with cyborgs, maybe,
and the other one is about like Swedish gnomes.
Yeah, and like
maybe it's like iRobot or something like that.
Yeah, or I imagine maybe she's like it's an old picture thing for like Star Trek and like the Borg. It's like what she's like.
Okay.
And so it's like this Borg gnome thing.
Right, and then she makes it and then tosses it into some world that looks like World of Warcraft.
Yeah, but I do think it's kind of interesting because like a cyborg is pieced together. It's well, not necessarily. I mean, there are cyborgs that are very well constructed in theory, but I mean, you also see in like the more apocalyptic robot like building it from pieces of scrap and other things to turn it into something new.
Yeah,
and the broken toy, like it has that
cute vibe.
It's
a cute vibe.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting way to look at that and how she is constructing and maybe as she's constructing and finding new things, the gnome changes as well. He's not always he's always kind of cyboric, but like he changes outfits and stuff.
Yeah.
And
so like as she encounters new pictures throughout the story,
Gadget.
Right? As she like new books and things like that, she kind of like outfits her gnome kind of like a sim.
Like he has he's like cowboy hat and a gun.
Yeah, and other times he has something else based on whatever last book that she encountered with pictures.
Yeah. And
he's always a cyborg now, just so we're clear.
And I do like the idea she's traveling with this man who's like she's kind of having to protect because once again he's very weak and sickly but this is the first time she ever gets to talk to someone about media because
he does know what that is.
And he has heard of some of this stuff. He's like, this character, and like they talk.
She's like, you know him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, she's freaked out at first. Like,
how do you know him? Can you where?
Well,
is
no,
he?
because she would have had the source material before.
And now I am getting a little bit more okay with there being a love interest between them because I think this actually does have a lot of potential for some actual real these two people connecting on this very spiritual level through this art and expression and I think it can go multiple ways. I think it could either be a love interest. I think it could be like a father-daughter kind of thing, or like a mother-son. Yeah. I think it depends on their ages, what we want to do there.
But they have. But the point is that they develop this relationship through how we as humans connect through art, media, and shared ideas.
Yeah, and through this, they're able to kind of bridge this even larger gap of the clone and human, the enemies for the clones, their enemies all their existence, which have been the humans,
right? And
so this vilified character who she starts to see and understand more about. I don't know. It's a weird kind of slippery slope.
It's so good.
If that makes sense.
It does. I understand what you're saying, but with good writing, proper management, right? Good time, that could be a very good story. I can't believe we are all right.
Where are we at on time?
51.
Oh.
So that means that we can do quick recap.
Yes. So I guess the main idea for the core of the world is that there were clones made to basically take over manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
the jobs no one else wanted, or the jobs that were dangerous.
Yeah.
They were genetically engineered to be slightly different than humans. I don't know, for tax reasons.
For tax.
Uh,
I almost feel like maybe like to make them more efficient workers or make them slightly more robust or whatever, so they
don't die.
last longer.
Yeah,
They
but
don't
I mean,
die.
also it's like, how do you avoid the old tricky slavery thing? Well, they're not humans, like,
Exactly.
and so
They're immortals.
And so they make
Immortals.
they make these beings to do this, and then humans get decimated by a genetic disease that the clones are spared from, and the clones use this as a kind of an opportunity to kind of rise up against the other people.
I mean, I picture that they just kind of
Minimal
milled.
effort.
I mean, I imagine that they kind of just milled about.
Like one
Because
day
they
it just
don't
was
really
like the
need-
door was unlocked and they could walk out.
Right,
Yeah.
and they just kind of mill.
I actually do like that.
I think
They
the
just
humans
mill
just
about. They haven't
got
done
so
anything.
weak.
Yeah,
You know?
and like and
And
see,
the humans went underground, and they, the survivors of the human underground, right? Like, they've reproduced in the meantime. But these clones have just been literally milling about, and in the milling about, right? Because they don't need as much to survive, so they live like for very, very long times, and they need little food.
But at the same time, they're not educated anyway. They
Right.
can't.
And
They're
so
not.
she's
They're
been
not
slowly-
trained to like upkeep electrical
Exactly.
grids and
Exactly.
water lines and all this other
Yeah,
stuff.
so they're like zombie-ish, not zombies, but they're just kind of milling about, and like she's created this whole world in her head based on the few things she's found over the couple hundreds of years of just milling.
And then
And then the human
I will
shows
say, why are these clones immortal? Why do
So,
they make that
because-
decision?
so the humans can come back up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, it could be more like.
I think they just live like maybe twice as long as humans would.
Okay. I mean, that's
Yeah,
fine. It's
'cause
just that the
even-
humans need time to, I guess, like build up an immunity, or people for.
But I think
Yeah.
that could happen in like 10 years or so.
Okay, good.
Like because I imagine
Sure.
the same. Yeah, that's definitely enough time for stuff to start getting like decrepit and overgrown, and stuff to start collapsing, and like and
40 or 50.
But at the same time, it's not like hundreds. I'm not saying that's wrong. Sorry, I feel like I've been going against a lot of what you guys have been saying.
That's good.
But it's just, to me, like, I feel like that's a little bit more. I hope that, because I hope that it helps connect a little bit more.
It helps the realism for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we
I guess in
don't
my
put
head,
it hundreds of years instead like decades.
I guess in my head, I picture this story not really beginning. Like, we don't really ever get to see the when they were enslaved. We just get flashbacks, perhaps, is what I kind of imagined. So I mean, most of this story is just like desolation interweaved with the ethereal space, interweaved. But then when that dude shows up, interweaving with finding art again together, whatever.
Yeah. But I think we can still reach that
Yeah.
with just not having as big of a gap,
Mm-hmm.
but also because I think that makes the wound a bit more fresh.
Yeah.
You know, there's a fear, because I think when the clones find him, it's not immediate like kill him for this, but it's
Right.
like they're like,
oh, what? I thought you were gone.
but it's
Yeah.
almost like fear. It's like, well, we've started living on our own. We don't want to go back to working for humans. So what do? Like, do we let him go? What if he brings back more humans? They know where we are. Like.
Mhm. But then she, in her delusion, has that new motive that, like, the disease is going to kill all the clones. So
Yeah.
that's why.
She thinks she overhears something, or there's a story going around that she hears from her friend that she finds out later is just made up. That it's like, well, humans, they could make this disease, and her gnome thing draws her to like, what we can do, we can use the human to find him, but we're going to have to break him out.
Yeah.
And so, they do this, they follow that path, they're having to travel across the country basically, because this man's trying to make it back to his family, or make it to somewhere like he knew he was separated when he's been in this bunker for so long, and he wants to get back to these people he knows,
Yeah,
or
so
this
he
safe
started
society.
over here, he runs into here, and then they go all the way that way.
Yeah, and so it's like going through all these landscapes and these deserts and fighting wildlife and Mad Max-esque gangs, and like having to deal with other clone societies, and like all this other stuff as they're traveling from place to place. Because I also like the idea maybe not all the clone societies are cloned from the same person. Like hers are all her, but they go to another place, it's a clone of a bunch of like these different guys, and like
Potentially.
I think there's a lot of expansion.
There's a lot of ways.
Yeah, and as they're until they finally make it to there, and the kind of big emotional ending is she gets to see media and all this other stuff, and like throughout this, maybe he's also teaching her how to read, so she's starting to be able to read the books and read the words along with her
And
pictures.
and characters in her ethereal world are as a result changing based on all this new information.
And like and I definitely think there's one character who she was way off on, like maybe like.
Well, it'd be a really sick but maybe interesting twist that the gnome ended up being evil.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That would be nice.
Her
No,
best friend.
like
you
that.
know?
Yeah. Like
her only friend in the world.
or like what if she finds out
yeah.
if she likes the Borg, she finds out the Borgs are the bad guy,
Mhm.
but the gnome is a mixture of this sweet
Oh, I love
gnome
that.
thing
and so
and
this
this
gnome
evil-
is
and
both good
that's
and
part
bad.
like, and the gnome could even have, and this is so silly that I'm saying this gnome could have this very intricate like
It could.
It could.
dialogue where
It should.
it's like I'm made of evil parts, like I am
What am I?
like yeah like
It's
like
a
that question
representation of self.
of like
Because we're good and bad as humans.
Yeah,
you know?
we're broken and we do shitty things, and does that make us shitty? Because we're made up of these shitty experiences and like all that and like that as she's discovering this and like coming
And
to
it
terms.
brings together her perfect world with the reality as they become closer and closer. So her imagination is slowly melding into something that is more grounded.
And you know what's the best part about this is if we, because I think it would be a book.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I picture is like a series
Yeah.
of novels, and then when they
Yeah.
made it into a movie, it would be a fucking metaphor for itself when the movie wasn't as good as the book.
It would
And hear me out,
because
hear
the
me
movie
out.
would be nearly as good as the book. Because
Yeah.
I feel like you could describe these landscapes, environments, and scenarios way better.
And just the
in that
internal
setting.
conflict more.
I mean, yeah. So what I think would be interesting as they go, let's say, west, right? It starts to get where they're going actually starts to have more life and foliage, and so it's like literally her.
Maybe at one
imagined
point she
world.
thinks she's imagining it, but it's the
Right,
real world.
exactly.
Yes.
So slowly they come together. So like she's lived in this world of like shitty gray and her imagined world, and then as she learns more with him, right? As he exposes stories, whatever she learns, to read,
Like she
et
sees
cetera, et
greenery
cetera.
for the first time, and
Right,
then
and
she
they
tries to
grow-
shake out her imagination,
Right,
but
they
it
begin
stays.
to overlap.
Do we
you know?
almost want this? Oh, I mean, it's a book, but like when the movie does come out, like almost Wizard of Oz like start out in black and white, and then just not necessarily all
I
at
know what
once
you mean.
become color, but like slowly
Yeah,
add color
exactly.
in.
As their journey
Yeah.
progresses and
And
she learns more.
that's way
Yeah, and I don't know if it's necessarily like black and white, but it feels black
It's
and
just
white.
because
Yes.
it's gray and shitty.
monochromatic.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's gray
but
and shitty.
but until her imagination comes up and fills it with color. But then that's the thing. As the movie progresses, there's that, and maybe there's also kind of like an opposite effect. Is sometimes her imagination's even by the end
Mhm.
bleaker than the reality she finds herself in.
Ooh.
Well, and then I don't think the apocalyptic challenges go away either. So then she has to, instead of like coping with them in her fantasy world, they become more of a reality.
Yep.
So it's not necessarily
like the
as
worlds are
hopeful
beginning
of a
to-
story.
As it's more like reality and imagination and art and human existence and how we get to cope with this
Yeah.
thing we are doing, which is life.
I think. I think another thing. Sorry, this is just one last thing. For when she's seeing all the media of what she's imagined in the movie form in the end, like near the end, before she kind of has her break with reality and freaks out and all this other stuff. I imagine maybe what sets her off is she sees one of her favorite characters die in media.
Mm-hmm. That would be a good idea.
Like,
yeah.
what a character that she really, really identifies with. And I mean, and that's so many like great heroes and stuff like that, like end up dying at the end of their story.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, no, like you can't do this.
Right.
This is,
Because in her world, in her ethereal world.
and like she
right.
blames humans for it because like you made this media, and
Why
you
would
made
you
this
do
character,
this?
and
You
why
killed
would you
him.
choose? You didn't have to do it. You were in charge, but you killed him. Like,
Right.
and I think that's like kind of the final weird thing in her like very shaky reality at this point that sets her over the top and kind of convinces her like this before it all comes crashing down when she finds out that there was no great plot, there was no great mission. She's not destined to save her kind or be the hero of the story.
She's just another basically human that
Yeah,
has to cope with existence.
She's not the hero, but she's another character.
Right.
And just because she doesn't save the world doesn't mean I
she
think there's
doesn't
a lot
matter.
of
That she doesn't matter.
There's depth there. There's a lot there.
This is very introspective. But anyways, and so yes,
there's our world. I think
there is our world.
Yeah.
My name is Linnea Anderson.
I'm Josh Robbins.
And I, as always, am your boy Tony. Or Anthony, I guess. Do I ever call myself Tony on this show?
I don't know.
Hey, audience, if you want to call me Tony, that's fine.
I mean, I've been calling you Tony.
Okay.
So, I mean, everybody knows that he has
Just
two
don't
names.
call me late for dinner.
Anyway, this has been Construction. I guess, like, happy building or whatever.
Good. This is nice.
Mediocre building at
Bye,
best, I
everybody.
guess. Best of luck.